Welcome to Site 282, Systems in Psychology. Study Session 1, The Concept and Evolution of Social Psychology. In this study session, you shall explore different definitions of social psychology by various authors and writers over the years. You will also examine historical development of social psychology and use the theories in social psychology. When you have studied this session, you should be able to discuss social psychology as a discipline of human-society relationships, highlight the evolution of social psychology, and explain system and theory. Various authors and researchers have defined social psychology over the years, and there seems to be a convergence in the definitions. The general emphasis in the definitions being on the relationships of the individual with the social environment. For you to have a proper understanding of the concept of social psychology, let us examine some of the definitions closely and see the social behavior they emphasize. Allport, 1985, defined social psychology as a scientific discipline that attempts to understand and explain how the thoughts, feelings, and behavior of individuals are influenced by the actual, imagined, and implied presence of others. In a similar development, Myers, 1993, defined social psychology as a scientific study of how people think about, influence, and relate to one another. These two definitions dwell on interpersonal influence in the social world. In other words, the presence of others and our interaction with them in how we see them will to a large extent determine our social behavior. For example, when a group of people is faced with threat to their group-held beliefs, the natural reaction is to gather and draw strength through a renewal of allegiance to their beliefs. The physical or actual presence of other group members at the gathering strengthens the resolve of all. Imagined presence of others is found to also affect how we behave. For example, anytime you attend doing something that is contrary to what a given authority stipulates, even if the authority figure is not actually present, the imagined presence influences the behavior enacted. While Allport and Myers emphasized interpersonal influence in social psychology, other authors emphasized the nodal joints between individuals and the society as a focus of social psychology. Bach, 1963, defined social psychology as an interstitial science covering the situations where actions of the individual and the forces of organized society interact. The Encarta Encyclopedia of 2005 defined it as a study of the relationships between individuals and the society. Taking the definitions together, it is obvious that social psychology is interested in studying scientifically how people influence one another and how they are influenced by the environment. Specific areas of study in social psychology include attitudes, behavior, values, and how these are organized and changed through phenomena such as social influence, social knowledge construction, and social interaction. We have just defined and explained the concept of social psychology in the preceding section. Let us now turn our attention to how the discipline evolved. The evolution of social psychology. Social psychology is considered a relatively young discipline as a scientific endeavor. Mark Gutty and Haslam 1997 put the age of the discipline at about 100 years old in 1997, and this makes it 110 years old in 2007. The development of social psychology can be set within 4 major periods, each representing a major landmark in the emerging discipline. The first period was between 1885 to 1994, and this is considered to be the early years of social psychology. This period was marked by what is generally accepted to be the first empirical study of social psychology. According to Franzoy, 2000, Triplett conducted a research on social facilitation in 1895 at Indiana University and reported that the presence of others actually influenced task performance and social behavior. In spite of Triplett's efforts, he was said to have done nothing to establish social psychology as a distinct scientific endeavor, an initiative that was taken by William McDougall and Edward Rose when they published different texts on social psychology in the year 1908. McDougall made the individual the focus of analysis, while Ross was concerned with groups, thereby making social psychology enmeshed in both psychology and sociology at the same time. However, Floyd Allport resolved this controversy in 1924 when he published a text in which he concluded that social psychology belongs to the realm of mainstream psychology and making the individual the unit of analysis. The second period of social psychology development falls between 1935 and 1945. There were 2 major events that facilitated a phenomenal growth in social psychology at this period. These were the Great Depression in the United States and the upheaval in Europe, which was caused by the World War II. Occasioned by the Great Depression, young social scientists came together to form an organization known as the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues. This society focused on the scientific study and intervention in social problems using psychological theories and principles. One significant contribution of this society was a practical introduction of ethics and values into the discussion of social life. 1946 to 1969 was a period of rapid expansion for social psychology in terms of theoretical foundations and research endeavor. Researchers actively engaged in studying various phenomena in the society, such as the rise and fall of Hitler in Germany, has attracted the attention of several social psychologists that started researching into the psychological dimensions of authoritarian personality. At this point, the concept of obedience and group influence on the individual also became focuses of research, as exemplified by the work of Milgram 1963 and Ask 1956. About the most prominent research and theory at this period was Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance. Generally, it can be said that activities during this period set the stage for diversity and prolific research later experienced in the scientific discipline of social psychology. The fourth period in the development of social psychology started in 1970 and it is still on to date. This period is often referred to as a crisis and reassessment period. This was a time that a more vital and inclusive field of psychology emerged. Emphasis was placed on high ethical standards in research and experimental methods to the study of social phenomena were embraced as research tools. Correlational method and other effective methods were also brought in, while area of study expanded to include issues like racism, gender and ethnic bias, as well as cross-cultural issues. This period was also an era that social psychology began to take root outside the shore of America. Social psychology associations started springing up in Europe, Latin America, and even the Third World, and as a consequence, the discipline began to span wider areas with its knowledge applied to every spectrum of our daily life like law, health, education, politics, sports, business, and the likes. Let us now take a look at the use of theory in social psychology. In the preceding sections, we talked about what social psychology is and its developmental stages. It was mentioned along the line that social psychologists develop and use theories in their quest to understand and explain social behavior. In this section, we will now turn our attention to what a theory is and what a theory can do. The word theory is commonly used in day-to-day interaction, and this has made it to have different meanings to different people and groups. The general usage of the word theory implies that it is a conjecture, an opinion or speculation that is not factual. No scientists see the theory as a logical explanation of the manner of interaction of a set of phenomena which is testable and have the ability to predict future occurrences similar in nature. More specifically, psychologists have defined a theory as a set of logically consistent statements about some behavioral phenomenon that best summarizes existing empirical knowledge of the phenomenon, organizes the knowledge in the form of precise statements of relationships among variables, provides a tentative explanation for the phenomenon, and serves as a basis for making predictions about behavior. A theory is never an end in itself. Rather, it is continually tested through empirical research, and the outcome can strengthen, modify, or disprove the theory in the light of new revelations. One major way through which a theory is tested is by formulating hypothesis, which is a testable proposition that describes a relationship that may exist between events. For any theory to be considered good enough for consideration, it must satisfy 4 basic conditions as spelled out by McMullen 1983. First, it must have predictive accuracy, that is, it must reliably predict behavior. Second, there must be internal coherence between the theoretical ideas. Third, it must be economical by containing only those things that are necessary to explain the phenomenon in question. And a good theory must be fertile, generating research that can be used to explain a wide variety of social behaviors. In this study session, we have learned that social psychology is a scientific study of how people think about, influence, and relate to one another. In other words, the presence of others, and our interaction with them and how we see them will to a large extent determine our social behavior. To achieve this, theories, that is, sets of logically consistent statements about some behavioral phenomenon, are used. We have now come to the end of study session 1. We thank you for listening.